Bitter Bret, boy, I tell you. I should have wore a pink shirt, but I'm not Cameron. Episode 2, The Bitter History. Bret the Bitter Man Hart. Now, episode 1, if you missed it, is about Hulk Hogan. Go check that out. His long history. Even, is Bret Hart a drill rapper? Because he was dissing Hogan from the grave. Hogan, you stinking hyena. You weren't Hollywood Hulk Hogan. You were Hollywood Hulk Hyena. You were Is hyena like a cuss word to Canadians? You stinking hyena. Hulk Hogan in the WCW. I always hated when Bret would say the WCW. I always hated that. Just say WCW. In the SummerSlam, just say at SummerSlam. Whatever. Is that a Canadian thing? Did he say A? I don't remember him saying A or talking about Canadian bacon, whatever. Hit the like button. Now, episode 2, if you missed episode 1, it's about his bitter history with Hulk Hogan, as I said. Episode 2, his feud, his disdain with the Nature Boy, Ric Flair, one of the greatest drunks in world history, Richard Flair. You know, I don't know who had more facelifts, Ric Flair or Charlotte Flair. You know, forget the 16 times world champion. Charlotte Flair is like a 17-time facelift champion. My God. Look at a picture of Charlotte Flair in 2026, and then 2022, and then 2019, and then 2012. And you tell me that's the same broad? She looks like 5 different WNBA players. Non-binary. Anyway, Ric Flair. Hit the like button. Now, the origin of Bret Hart's bitterness. Bitter Bret. With Ric Flair, to my knowledge, I believe it comes from when Ric Flair was the world champion of the WWF in the year 1992. Now, pause there. Bret Hart, he had an interview somewhere, I don't know, it might have been with Meltzer or somewhere, where he was saying, you know, I always thought, even in the 80s, I thought Ric Flair, he was good in the 80s, but towards the late 80s, he kind of shed, every match became the same, and then by the 90s, he was no longer given any effort, and every match he's done is the same for 30, 40 years or whatever. Okay, but it works. It's Ric Flair, and it worked. Ric Flair did do the same match for 40 years, but he's Ric Flair, and it worked. What does that mean? He had the charisma, the magnetism, great speaker. He was Ric Flair. He can get away with that. He can get away with that. And him having the same match that always worked every night, it always worked. It wasn't like, Flair, you're doing the same match, but it gets no reaction. No, he got a reaction every night for 40 years. So that complaint, it's irrelevant because it's working. But Bret Hart, he's always been a bitter hater. It's not new. A lot of people, they think Bret Hart became bitter because of Montreal. No, he was always this way. He was always somewhat of a malcontent. He not quite Austin Aries or CM Punk malcontent, but he was always a little bit of that. He always had that. Always. He did not become that way because of Montreal or Owens passing. He always had this. Now, Montreal just made it explode, pause, 1,000 times more, and so did Owens passing. But even with that, and we will get to Owen Hart's passing, but Bret Hart has always come off as being more bitter about wrestling angles than his own family passing away, which has always been grossly disgusting to me. Because like Scott Hall said, Bret Hart is a mark for Bret Hart. Real men wear pink, my ass. Pause. Now, the base of the heat, aside from Bret Hart just never thinking that highly of Flair, for the most part, was when Flair was the WWF champion in 92, and Bret Hart was finally going to get his main event push, and they have a match, and, I believe Bret Hart kind of felt like Flair was, sabotaging their match when he was going to win the title from Flair, and Flair was kind of being lazy, and, Bret Hart always accused Ric Flair of giving low effort, like I just said. Flair had the same match every night for 30 years. He gives no effort, and so Bret Hart was stuck on that for years. Now, of all the wrestlers to criticize for giving no effort or low effort, there's like 1,000 wrestlers that you could give that to way more than Ric Flair. Van Hammer. Did Bret Hart ever complain about Van Hammer? El Dandy? We will have an El Dandy episode of this series. He violated El Dandy for no reason right in front of Mean Gene Okerlund. Mean Gene Okerlund. The grudge between Bret and Ric Flair. Bret Hart claimed that Ric Flair purposefully gave a lazy, low-effort performance in the match where Hart was to win his first world title from Flair. Even when Bret is finally going to win the match, he's just miserable. Has he ever thought maybe Flair was tired, beat up? No. Ric Flair, you stinking hyena. You didn't want to put me over, you hyena. Flair's WWF run was such a disappointment. It was supposed to be a mythical, magical run. Him and Hogan finally, but then it just for some reason, Hogan Flair in '91, it didn't do anything for anybody. It was supposed to be the main event of WrestleMania 8 in the Hoosier Dome, and of course, that got changed to Hogan Sid, which had the infamous, iconic return of the Ultimate Warrior, who people thought was a different person because he was slimmer. Well, he cut down on his juice usage. Where's my drink? But and then Hogan Sid was the main event, and then Flair and Savage had their angle where Flair had all these quote unquote pictures. Flair was doing revenge porn in '92 with Miss Elizabeth. There was some picture with a horse. Patterson, some bananas or something. Anyway, but so Bret Hart was, Flair, you tried to screw me. You screwed me. Flair, you screwed me first. In '92, when I was going to win my title, you stinking hyena, you screwed me. And Vince McMahon, Jack Tunney, you turn a blind eye to it. You turn a blind eye to it. Bret Hart's so damn emotional, man. God damn. You turn a blind eye. Jack Tunney, you piece of man. Whatever happened to Jack Tunney, man? He got to be dead, I assume. Wasn't Jack Tunney Canadian? So Bret Hart couldn't get help from his fellow Canuck, or his what's another hockey team? Maple Leaf. Couldn't help him. Jack Tunney. The insults over the years. So '92 just set off Bret once again. Bret Hart is one of these people. He's like Cornette. I don't like you, so I don't like you until I don't like you forever, even to your death, after your death. Like these people like this, they take these things to mean so much to them. It never means that much to anyone else. Shawn Michaels said that, and we will get to Shawn Michaels on this series. Shawn Michaels said that, the whole, the image of the wrestler, it means so much to Bret Hart. It don't mean that much to everybody else. And maybe that's why they come off as much happier than Bret Hart. Bret Hart, you not putting him over how he liked it, he just takes it so personal. Why? You're going over. You're the top guy. You're making money. Why are you crying? It's Bret Hart. Malcontent. The insults over the years. Bret Hart, over the years, publicly blasted Ric Flair as grossly overrated and highly predictable in the ring. Once again, having the same match. The retaliation. Ric Flair at some point would fire back in his book, stating that Bret Hart could never draw money for the wrestling business. Now, that's not completely true. Now, when Bret Hart became the top guy, quote unquote, in late '92, all the way 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, early 97, Bret Hart was not a draw in America. But Bret Hart was always a big draw in Canada. And he was always a big draw overseas. So people saying he was never a draw, that's not true. He was a big draw in India, Germany, Canada. These are facts. In fact, he drew more than Ric Flair would ever draw in those countries, those continents. That's a fact. Asia, overseas, any continent, He was a draw. He was not a draw in America. But you people have something of, if you want to draw in America, you want to draw it all. No, it's called wrestling. Wrestling is more than just the United States. Other people were never draws. Shawn Michaels would go to another continent, country. He wasn't a draw. Bret Hart was always a bigger draw than Shawn Michaels. That's a fact. But you people never say Shawn Michaels wasn't a draw. How come you people never say that? Bret Hart was a draw around the world, just not in America. And that's a fact in WWF. In WCW, he was never put in a position to draw. And then when they made him the top guy in late 99, the company was dead. No one could draw. That's just a fact. Not an opinion. That's a fact. But Ric Flair was a draw in America. And Ric Flair was a draw anywhere around the world pretty much. Now, but people labeling Bret Hart as that's incorrect. In a way, it's correct, but in totality, it's not. But wrestling is about drawing, and you can't compare what Bret Hart drew to Ric Flair because it's Ric Flair. He's far superior for a longer period of time. But Ric Flair, he is arguably the greatest wrestler, but also Ric Flair, he always was a political player, and he always had friends who were in the booking office. So Flair was never going to really flounder until Jim Herd came in. Jim Herd, Pizza Hut legend. And then Bischoff, he kind of wasted Flair a lot of the time. But there's no comparison. Ric Flair versus Bret Hart in being a draw, there's no comparison. As a technical wrestler, Bret Hart, he has that. As an athlete, Bret Hart was a better athlete. But everything else, Flair was a better talker, promo, draw, charisma, character, magnetism, everything else. Longevity, it's not even close. There's no comparison. Once again, Ric Flair is arguably the best wrestler, the greatest wrestler of all time. And if he's not number one, he's number two. But that's his feud with Ric Flair. They were together in WCW. Bret Hart's first big match was Ric Flair in 98, if I'm not mistaken. I want to say, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't Bret Hart's first pay-per-view match, wasn't it Sold Out 98 versus Flair, I want to say? And that really was probably Bret Hart's highlight of WCW, because literally it went downhill from there. Okay, the further you go to 98, what was Bret Hart doing in March of 98? May of 98. What was he doing? Like, when I think of Bret Hart WCW, it's the Starrcade botched ending where he's stopping a screw job and whatever. And then the next thing is him and Flair doing promos to build up to their match. And then they have their match, which was a good match. It wasn't an all-time classic, but it was a good match. And then after his match with Flair, I don't even remember what the hell is Bret Hart doing. My next memory is in like the summer of 98, he's Hogan's lackey. Like, they turned Bret Hart into like a taller Billy Kidman. He's just like a guy in a group. But and then he was like, wasn't Bret Hart like the TV champion, US champion facing Booker T? Like, why is Bret Hart a mid-carder? Then 99, like, what was he doing? And then I don't remember. And then when I think of 99, the only memory I have is the angle of Goldberg where he had like the steel plate. And then he quit the company. And then Owen passed. And then later on, he returned to give like a speech about it. And then later on, he had like some 30-minute Nitro match with Benoit. Then he wins the title. And then they do NWO 2000. So Bret Hart's WCW run was just a disaster. I don't think him and Flair really had that much tension or interaction in WCW years. But Bret Hart, once again, he don't like you one time, he will rant on you forever and ever and ever and ever. Now, Ric Flair, he does play that game of, I don't know why Bret Hart doesn't like me. I don't know why Shane Douglas doesn't like me. One minute, Ric Flair, I don't know why anyone doesn't like me. Then the next minute, he's drunk burying you. This is wrestlers. This is the carny nature of this business. So that's the feud of Ric Flair. Don't let Ric Flair die first, because Bret Hart will go on a spree against him the way he did Hogan. What are your thoughts on Ric Flair or Bret Hart's bitterness towards Ric Flair? What has ever made Bret Hart satisfied? Sonny's blowjob? I mean, What are your thoughts on this? Bret Hart's bitterness towards the Nature Boy, Ric Flair. Leave your thoughts in the comment section. If you want to support the channel, or if you have a video request, you could donate to the Cash App. It's XDN Wins. This episode 2, episode 3, we will further delve into his bitterness towards Eric Bischoff in WCW. Because once again, Bret Hart is a lot like Cornette. I might have to make a video about who's more bitter or who's more petty or who's more ridiculous, Cornette or Bret Hart, and then I might have to compare their wives. You seen Bret Hart's wife? The one from Wrestling with Shadows. Or was that Beyond the Mat? No, Bret was in WWE. The one from Wrestling with Shadows. Would you rather have Bret's wife or Cornette's wife? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I'm up out of here. Check out the first episode about his bitter nature towards Hogan. And stay tuned and stay subscribed for this series. I got to eat off Bret Hart's carcass. XDN Wins, XDN Wrestling. That is it.